How does an ordinary housewife working at Detroit's Willow Run factory during the cold winter days of 1943 discover a major conspiracy threatening the United States war effort? The small piece of paper Mary Thompson found that day would reveal a terrifying truth that would endanger not only her own life, but the lives of thousands of American soldiers. What would you do if you faced such a situation? You can send your own stories to the email address in the description.
I am Mary Thompson. When I remember those days, I still get goosebumps. It was December 1943, and thick snow clouds hung over the city of Detroit. As I walked toward the Willow Run factory in the morning hours, my breath came out as vapor, and the icy sidewalks under my feet crackled. I was 32 years old then, medium height, always keeping my brown hair pulled back in a tight bun. My hands had hardened from working with metal parts for days, with fine cuts on my palms. My eyes were green and growing paler each day from the anxiety that the war brought. My husband Robert was fighting in Europe against Nazi Germany. The last letter from him was 3 weeks ago, and in his letter he wrote that he was somewhere in northern France, but couldn't tell me his exact location. Every night when I went to bed, I would toss and turn until morning, wondering if he was safe. My 16-year-old daughter, Sarah, and I waited for news from Robert every day in our small house in Detroit's industrial district. The Willow Run factory was one of the largest war materials production centers in the United States at that time. This massive factory complex, in the form of giant hangars, was an enormous place where tens of thousands of workers labored, producing bombs, ammunition, and aircraft parts day and night without stopping. The giant American flag at the factory entrance fluttered in the Michigan wind, and every morning as I passed through those gates, I felt like an important part of the war effort. That December morning, I was assigned to the 6th block on the bomb production line, as usual. On the steel tables were metal parts arranged in rows, precision tools, and complex mechanisms that brought together deadly explosives. Among my co-workers were women of different ages. Most of us were housewives, but the war had turned us into factory workers. Rosa Martinez, who worked beside me, was a strong Mexican-American woman in her 40s with 3 sons fighting in the Pacific. Her brown eyes were always full of determination, and her hands were as hardened as mine. Our factory supervisor was Heinrich a middle-aged man born in Germany, but living in the United States for years. To compensate for his short stature, he always stood upright, constantly monitoring workers with his stern gaze. His hair was beginning to gray, and his face had deep lines. When he spoke, his slight German accent was still noticeable, and this situation created discomfort among some workers. Especially during this period of the war, having someone of German origin in such a sensitive position worried many people. That day during lunch break, I went to the small break room where I usually spent my time. The room was quiet, away from the factory noise, with windows overlooking Detroit's industrial landscape. While browsing through old magazines on the table, I noticed a small piece of paper that someone had hastily left behind. At first, I was going to ignore it, but the handwriting on the paper caught my attention. The writing was in German. Since I had taken German classes during my high school years, I could partially understand what was written. My heart rate accelerated as I picked up the paper and began to read. What was written horrified me. The note contained serial numbers of bombs produced at the factory, shipping dates, and the most critical information, defective part codes. Someone was deliberately creating malfunctions in the bombs and transmitting this information to someone else. My hands began to tremble. If this information fell into enemy hands, American soldiers' lives would be in danger. My husband Robert might be using one of these bombs. I put the paper in my pocket and hurriedly left the break room. Thousands of questions swirled in my head. Who had written this note? Who were they communicating with? Most importantly, what should I do? During the afternoon shift, I decided to be more careful than usual. I began observing Heinrich Weber, who was coming and going from his office. What hours was he making phone calls? Weber displayed normal behavior for the rest of that day, but now there was suspicion in my eyes toward him. When I returned home that evening, my daughter Sarah was doing her homework in the kitchen. Her long blonde hair fell to her shoulders, her blue eyes focused on math problems. I tried to act normal, but Sarah immediately noticed I was anxious. As a 16-year-old girl whose father was at war, she immediately sensed changes in her mother's mood. "Mom, did something happen? You look very tense," she asked, putting down her pencil. "No, sweetheart, I just had a busy day at the factory," I said, but there was tension in my voice. I couldn't sleep that night. As I tossed and turned in my bed, I thought about what the note I found meant. If sabotage was really happening, who was responsible? Weber or someone else? And most importantly, who should I report this to? The next morning when I went to the factory, I decided to arrive earlier. Before most workers had arrived yet, I began wandering near Weber's office. While roaming the corridors under the pretense of cleaning, I tried to listen to the sounds coming from his office. Weber was talking to someone in German on the phone. His tone was tense and hurried. As days passed, I continued to observe Weber more closely. I began to discover suspicious points in his behavior. Especially on Thursdays, during lunch break, he would leave the factory and return about an hour later. He never broke this routine, and this situation caught my attention. One Thursday, I gathered my courage and decided to follow him. When he left the factory, I saw him enter a small cafe about 2 blocks away. Looking through the cafe window, I noticed Weber meeting with an elderly man sitting in the corner. This man had thick glasses, completely white hair, and a hunched posture. I could see paper exchanges between the two of them. My heart was beating so fast that I had trouble breathing. This meeting was definitely suspicious. Was Weber giving secret information from the factory to this man? But I wasn't sure yet and needed more evidence. When I returned home that evening, I began thinking about who to report this situation to. Should I go to the FBI, or should I first report to factory management? But what if Weber had accomplices in factory management too? In that case, they could put me in danger as well. My daughter Sarah noticed again during dinner that her mother was anxious. "Mom, is there news from Dad?" she asked. The last letter was more than 3 weeks ago, and we were both worried about Robert's situation. "Not yet, sweetheart, but it will come soon," I said, but I was eating myself up inside. What if Robert used one of these defective bombs? What if my husband lost his life because of Weber's sabotage? The next day, I found an opportunity to enter Weber's office to clean. At that time, he was in another meeting, and his office was empty. I quickly looked around and checked his desk drawers. In the bottom drawer, I found a small locked box. With my heart beating wildly, I tried to force the box's lock with the letter opener in the office. When the box opened, what I saw inside shocked me. Dozens of notepapers, bomb serial numbers, shipping lists, and most shocking of all, letters stamped with official seals that were clearly from Nazi Germany. Weber really was a saboteur and was in communication with German intelligence. With trembling hands, I quickly read one of the letters. The letter, written in German, asked Weber to systematically create defects in bombs produced at the factory, thereby ensuring that American soldiers' weapons would not explode during war. Below the letter was the official seal of Nazi Germany. This was the most terrifying moment of my life. I quickly photographed the documents in my hands and restored the box to its original state. I had to get out of the office before Weber returned. As I walked down the corridor, my legs were shaking and I had trouble breathing. Now I knew what I had to do. I had to go to the FBI office immediately. During that lunch break, I ran out of the factory to the federal building in downtown Detroit. When I told FBI agents about the situation, they didn't believe me at first. But when I showed them the photographs in my hand, the agents' facial expressions changed. Agent Michael O'Connor, a tall, black-haired agent, immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. His green eyes were full of determination, and the seriousness in his voice reassured me. "Mrs. Thompson, the United States is grateful to you. Thanks to this information, we can prevent a great disaster," he said. The next day, FBI agents arrested Weber in a coordinated operation. Other workers at the factory were in shock. No one knew who Heinrich Weber really was. During the operation, even more shocking documents were found in Weber's home. He had been working as a Nazi agent for years, sabotaging the United States war efforts. That evening, when I returned home, my daughter Sarah was waiting for me at the door. "Mom, what happened at the factory?" "Everyone is talking about manager Heinrich being arrested," she asked. I decided to tell her the truth. She was 16 years old and had the right to know what happened. I told her about Weber's identity, the sabotage, and how I caught him. Sarah's eyes widened and she said, "Mom, you became a hero." But I didn't feel like a hero. I had just done what was right. I had done what I needed to do for my husband Robert and thousands of American soldiers, for my homeland. A week later, the mailman knocked on our door. A letter from Robert had arrived. Opening the envelope with trembling hands, I learned that he was safe and sound. In his letter, he wrote that the ammunition they used was of very high quality and the bombs worked perfectly. At that moment, I realized that by stopping Weber, Robert and his friends were able to use safe weapons. Agent O'Connor from the FBI came to our house a few days later. "Mrs. Thompson, thanks to our operation, we collapsed a large part of the Nazi sabotage network. Through Weber, we caught agents who were sabotaging 17 different factories. Thanks to your courage, we saved the lives of thousands of American soldiers," he said. I continued working at the Willow Run factory, but I was a different person now. I had learned that the war was being fought not only on the front lines, but in our homes, workplaces, and every moment of our daily lives. Each of us had a role to play in this war, and I had played my part. When the war ended, Robert returned home. When I told him about what I experienced at the factory, I could see pride in his eyes. "Mary, you're not just my wife, you're also a hero of this country," he had said.
Mary Thompson's brave action became a life-saving decision not only for her own family, but for thousands of American soldiers. During the complex and dangerous days of the war period, the courage shown by an ordinary factory worker was proof of how powerful patriotism could be. The capture of Weber and his network was critically important for the internal security of the United States. Mary's story shows that the war was fought not only on the front lines, but in every corner of the homeland, and that every citizen played an important role in this struggle. What did this story make you feel, and how would you have acted if you faced such a situation?